Trade talks between the U.S. and China are set to resume next month after more than a year of tense negotiations. Earlier today, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin painted a rosy picture of the U.S. economy despite the ongoing trade war with China. Take a listen.
I think there have been certain situations where there have been difficulties for companies, and Ambassador Lighthizer has done a very good job managing the exception process on a case-by-case basis. So we have not seen an impact on the U.S. economy, and we'll be very carefully managing that. I expect we're going to see a very robust finish of the year. And as I said, no signs of a recession. The Trump economy, the economic plan is working.
Joining us now is Ryan Patel, the Drucker School of Management. He's a senior fellow at Claremont Graduate University as well. Ryan, good to have you on today. You heard the secretary there saying that, look, we haven't seen a significant impact on the economy, and yet you are in touch directly with some of these businesses that are having to make decisions around the trade war. What are you hearing?
So here's the thing. I mean, it's a rosy picture this week. We were talking about 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. Everybody was at even keel and don't know what was going to happen. I think why that up and down really affects these business decisions for the future. Investments specifically, what are they trying to do for next year's plan? If you can't solidify the trade, manufacturing, you just can't move your businesses from China and go elsewhere. Think about this for small businesses. Ignore the large manufacturers. Small businesses, they want to get more investment. They're growing. Then you take China away, for example, if that's what's their valuation now? You took away, if the trade war goes into detail as what we've seen between Trump and China, is what? Companies move out, don't do business with China. That takes away a lot of the consumers and goods behind that. And that's kind of scary. And maybe companies are not planning completely for that, but they now have to plan for what is plan B and plan C and able to execute on them. No, like this trade war has gone long enough that if you don't have a plan to execute on, is going to be key.
So let's try to break that down by sectors. There are some companies, especially in manufacturing, that have to make this decision. Number one, if they move out of China, what is that market that they can pick up on the other end? And, we know that once these decisions are made, they don't go back. And,
we've been seeing this for China. The top 2-3 places, I think, Vietnam and India have been one of those two countries that always come top to mind, and they're providing incentives. Obviously, the downside is that the infrastructure there just yet, but really
they don't have the same skilled labor in places like Vietnam that they do in China.
And exactly, and I think that's where the lead time is going to be really important. And I think China is also not sitting back, not doing anything. They're really focusing on high-end manufacturing, right? And so if you want to stay there and do that, then you're going to have to stay within this China supply chain perspective. But I mean, there is routes to be able to go to these other countries, but you got to really make a decision kind of now instead of later, because then you'll get caught up.
So the argument I think the administration has made is that if you just look at the headline numbers, things aren't as bad, especially when you consider it to what's happening in Asia, what's happening in Europe. What do you think is the element or the factor that's not represented in those numbers that you see based on some of the conversations you've had with these companies?
It's really about holding money back. Who's really fully scaling and growing forward right now? I can't name a whole bunch of companies off the top of my head to say we're putting a lot more investment in certain countries without really seeing any kind of hesitation. But really the U.S. economy, like you said, the numbers look fine. I mean, they're in a good spot. They are obviously 2-3% GDP where they're supposed to be. But if there was a worrisome, if there was a downside, is can the other global, we're all intertwined. If the other global economies start to tank a little bit, how will the U.S. economy kind of factor into that?
You talk about holding back investment. That's something that we heard a lot in earnings calls where the CapEx numbers haven't increased, and yet that hasn't necessarily led to job cuts just yet. What is the tipping point, you think?
Yeah, it's when you get those bad comparable sales in a kind of consecutive manner in 6 to 7 months when there is no kind of future potential, right? And when you take the potential out of maybe in a trade war or maybe places that you can't get your supply chain, your margins get hit a little bit. That's when you're starting to kind of feel that crunch, right? When margins start to go down.
Are we already there yet?
I don't think so yet. I think they're going to buy. I mean, holiday season's coming. Fourth quarter's coming. Usually a pretty good quarter. Typically, people don't take cuts right around there. Let's look at quarter one, because that's where we're going to start seeing some cuts, because when they're about to see what happens at the end of the year.
And finally, if you want to look at the bright spot, it has been the consumer. It has been, some of these retail sales numbers. How much of that is sustainable, do you think?
Well, I mean,
you pointed to the holiday season. We've heard the administration talk about holding back on some of the tariffs as a way to say, look, we don't want to ruin your holiday by raising the prices. And yet there is still that December 15th deadline that's looming.
Well, listen, they need to take off the tariffs for the holiday season. The consumer confidence is one of the points of reasons why we are at where we are in spending. People are spending money, even though maybe companies are not spending money. And that's a big thing to keep the economy growing. And I think the second piece behind this is December 15th is not right around the corner, right? And you're really going to have to decide what they're going to do with the tariff plan behind it. But I had a feeling that that the administration wasn't going to touch the quarter four because it's an important piece for the U.S. economy. You can't take a hit like that without being prepared.
Okay, Ryan Patel, good to have you in studio.
Thank you.